Generation at Eskom responding or fielding questions from parliamentarians in the inquiry into the shenanigans and business at Eskom. He's painstakingly tried to clarify his role in the transaction with Tegeta, also highlighting the fact that Glencore, from the time they took acquisition of Optimum Mine in 2012, that they had pleaded and claimed hardship, and that this was largely based on the volatility of the international coal pricing, and Eskom turning back and saying they are holding Glencore to the service agreements that they'd signed, and this is where the bone of contention then led to. We joined in studio by Tsepo Hadima, political and economic analyst, Vutsang Muilwa, political analyst. Thanks so much for your time, gentlemen. Much appreciated. Long time no see, by the way. Welcome back.
Thank you, Cindy.
Okay, so now this process, Tsepo, we had spoken about it, that it seems that there is a predetermined outcome that the members of the parliamentary committee want to hear, because it sort of stagnates between Tegeta, no matter how much the explanations have come forth, be it from Brian Molefe previously and now with Matshela Koko. Is that your view, that there is just no moving forward beyond the Tegeta issue?
Well, of course, there will be no moving beyond Tegeta issue, because this is nothing but a kangaroo court with a predetermined outcome. It is therefore a witch hunt, and they have still not been able to really do anything to dispel the accusation that this so-called Eskom inquiry is nothing but a witch hunt to effectively achieve a predetermined outcome. So, but I mean, if you are going to try and do what they are doing, at least they should have been a little bit more meticulous, they should have been a little bit more agile, they should have been a little bit more prepared. And you can clearly hear from the questions that they are asking. They say, judge a person on the questions they ask and not on the answers that they give. So these members of parliament, as I was even saying this morning, that we find that they are effectively, I think, pious and pompous. But that's really what it is. Now, it reminds me of Gerinel, when in the Oscar Pistorius trial, when Roger Dixon was stung by his own report, supposedly that he had authored. And then Gerinel responded and said, see, Mr. Dixon, how irresponsible it is to make inferences on subject matters you know nothing about. These members of parliament, when will they heed Mr. Gerinel's rebuke and advice to not make inferences on subject matters they know nothing about? They still have not taken no effort whatsoever to familiarize themselves with the workings and the operations of an exceedingly important state enterprise such as Eskom. And the question that is still lingering is that exactly how is this so-called inquiry helpful to keeping the lights on? How is it helpful to ensuring that we can have Eskom that is still continuing to be the lowest cost producer, that we can have an Eskom that can assure anyone who invests in this economy in terms of the productive sectors that they will be able to have security of supply of electricity, which is critical, particularly in the manufacturing and even in the mining space. Now, this inquiry is nowhere near answering those questions. But what is even worse, to this day, I'm still shocked and horrified that they still haven't made any pronouncement or announced any intention to subpoena Glencore to come and answer. They have not made any intention or announced anything to subpoena Exaro also to come and testify before this inquiry. Glencore, who exactly put them under what pressure to put the company into business rescue? Because that was a decision that belonged to Glencore and nobody else. And today, they are clutching at straws to say, well, Matshela, what role did you play? What role could he have played?
And that's exactly the point that, for me, almost changed the entire narrative, in the sense that Glencore had, since 2012, pretended and insisted on financial hardships. But we know now that, based on the submission by Mr. Koko, that this was as a result of international coal prices, that when the times were good, Glencore and Optimum were performing fine, but the minute that they hit, or their profits dwindled, they then expected Eskom to come and rescue them and increase the price. I mean, why then would we want to believe that there is undue influence on one party and not on the other side, in the sense of Glencore?
Well, see, you know, Tsepo had said earlier on something very critical to say, when I look at this whole process as well, the inquire on the MPs, they are not listening, or they do not want to hear the responses or arguments and explanations that are given by people they have called to come and testify, like Mr. Matshela Koko. Evidence has been put in front of them. Instead of them dealing with the evidence that has been put in front of them, test it and focus on the answers. They just run rhetorically with the questions that they came prepared and planned. That's why each one of them keeps on repeating the question that was answered before. And it looks like we keep on going back. I don't think there's anybody in their right sense of mind would have gone to such an inquiry in front of, you know, MPs, and you are not prepared, especially that people like Brian Molefe were there before. I think Matshela Koko is not that stupid that he would not go there, not having answers or prepared himself. That's why it's repetitive and it's boring. But also, you know, I just said to Tsepo earlier on, why does it look like we are analyzing or talking about the investigation of together with Eskom and certain individuals within Eskom? You know, we are not looking at the entire leadership of Eskom, from the board to the supply chain management, to all the executives and everybody else who was involved in that process. A few items, a few transactions are selected from whatever Eskom did over the years, and they are being brought to the table. There is silence, as you mentioned correctly, with Exaro and other companies which are doing business with Eskom. If there's been irregularities in a state-owned enterprise, you wouldn't look selectively at one that is suspected to have been irregular. You look at the entire organization to try and find the links to say, has Eskom been conducting itself in an improper manner across the board or all along, or did it start with this one? Now, you can't just focus on the one that you are suspecting there's some wrongdoing on it. Now, what happened today is Matshela Koko came into the picture and he says, but what are you talking about? Here is some form of evidence and light that we have conducted business in a similar, not exactly the same, but in a similar fashion before, and nobody questioned it. Now, we looked at the interest of the organization, the interest of the employees, and the interest of the country, and we had to do what we did before, or even in an advanced manner. And there's nothing wrong with that. But Tsepo is correct. MPs should have sat down and informed themselves whether state-owned enterprises like Eskom in this particular instance, can they do what they did, so that when you answer or ask those questions, you will be able to know whether they diverted from the normal prescribed procedures or not. And I don't see that coming from MPs. And Tsepo is saying they're not experts. I don't expect MPs to be experts in the field that they are, you know, elected into those portfolio committees and parliamentary committees. But they should at least inform themselves. If you are sitting in that committee, inform yourself on how an organization that you are supposed to be cross-examining or cross-questioning operates. And they are not doing that.
But you're saying that it's a smear campaign, because from what came out from Mr. Koko saying that it is hurtful, it's almost similar from where we saw Brian Molefe breaking down in tears, in the sense that there is this warfare, if you like, on your character. You're being vilified, you're called a thief, etc. And now that he has the opportunity to explain it, there isn't an appetite to want to look at the veracity of perhaps having a bit of truth in what he's saying. Number one, saying that it was Suzanne Daniels who was also present in a meeting when he was offered to walk away from this particular transaction. He was almost persuaded to sign a dodgy deal by the former chairperson, Mr. Tsotsi, and of which he refused. So we tend to only want to lean on one narrative and not look at what the possibility or probabilities are.
Well, one can only hope that the law enforcement agencies in this country and those within our criminal justice system are listening to the testimony that is led, even though it is not cross-examined and there's no follow-up from the members of parliament. But one can only hope that they are listening, because that allegation, as so made by Mr. Matshela Koko this evening, that or earlier today, that he was approached at a hotel somewhere in Midrand to say, listen, you know, we need you to step down. If you don't step down, we're going to deal with you. That is criminality which must be prosecuted. Because until such time that we get to a level in this country where people are not abusing their power, those are in positions, that the rule of law must be seen to be alive and be adhered to at all material times, we will unfortunately, as a country, lose it. But as for Mr. Matshela Koko himself, I think in terms of the testimony as he was leading it and as he continues to lead it into the night, he's a very impressive witness in my view, because he's thoroughly knowledgeable of the enterprise of the company And that, is something that needs to be welcomed, more so in terms of the number of years he spent at Eskom. So it appears that indeed, and it should be more reassuring for us, that he's got an in-depth understanding of the nature of the company, and hence, therefore, in that position that he's in, we can be assured that the lights will be on. And also that fact that he's been able to lead testimony which has not been rebutted, to the effect that he took corrective action in his executive authority and is so delegated in terms of the various rules that exist. That is to be welcomed. The question is, why are we so much interested in Eskom, and why are some of us actually very concerned in the manner that this inquiry is unfolding? I mentioned the other day that the daily turnover of Eskom is over 485 million rand a day. Eskom is important to every single person. Listen, if you are alive, if you are about to be born, you need Eskom. If you are dead and not yet buried or cremated, you need Eskom. That's how important Eskom is in our lives. And therefore, it's a very important national asset that we should not allow this type of conduct, which at the end of the day adds no value whatsoever in terms of its ability to be able to function. We are not asking the right questions. Now, for example, we now know that Eskom took, or the leadership at the time, led by Mr. Brian Molefe and Mr. Matshela Koko was there, depending whichever time was there, they took a correct decision to refuse the blackmailing by Glencore to increase the price in 2 tranches to eventually 3 times what the current price was until the end of this year. That was a correct decision. The savings, the members of parliament are not asking about the annual savings that have since been made with having refused Glencore's demand of doubling of the price from 150 rand to 300 rand and then to 450 rand. So that is very critical, and they're not asking that question. But secondly, as we sit here tonight, we now know that the company, which is Tegeta, that owns Optimum. Optimum, in fact, has fallen lower, or the production has come lower. And why has the production come lower? It's because it is alleged that one of the equipment suppliers, what they call the yellow equipment suppliers, which is Barloworld, it would appear that Barloworld was itself put under duress to have to stop supplying equipment to Tegeta or to Oak Bay, in turn meaning that now the company is left with the means of production, and if it's left without means of production, it now is not able to fulfill its conditions in terms of supply into Eskom. But then the risk, of course, to Eskom is that now if they don't have coal per day, as I said, when you look at the numbers in terms of the daily turnover, it means if that power station that is supplied from Optimum is no longer able to get coal, 1 or 2 things is going to happen. Either the economy is going to feel it because of load shedding, or at the same time, we are going to see increased costs, meaning that this greedy cartel of other coal miners are going to profiteer even more. So, and that is a conduct that we should not allow. Why do we allow a company such as Barloworld that is listed on the JSE, that is supposed to operate within certain ethics? Why is Parliament not asking us what in law did they rely on to have to now withdraw the equipment when they were being paid for that equipment? And these are the number of things that we are seeing. The skullduggery we are seeing happening in the economy is despicable and must not be tolerated whatsoever.
Yeah, is that the intolerance of having new entrants, or is it more around the state of capture and the demise of President Zuma and his business associates, the Guptas, that the focus has become so dangerous, the gravitas thereof, as serious as it is, but has become so toxic to what else is happening around these state-owned entities?
Well, Cindy, when you look at all the inquiries that has happened in the country towards state-owned enterprises, it's Eskom, it's SABC, and SAA, if I can mention only those 3. If you look at the whole focus, it's where associates of the president of the country are being said to be linked to those transactions or those investigations and inquiries. This whole wagga up and down that is happening with MPs not knowing what they are doing and allowing the private sector that is gradually losing government lucrative and green contracts towards new competitors in the market. It is all been pinpointed to destabilize, and make sure that those people who have challenged the green contracts are being exposed as being corrupt and all that. To this date, we haven't even found one of those transactions that has been tested in court, and a company like Tegeta has been found to be corrupt or wanting. But Sabo is also mentioning how Eskom is not supposed to take care of basic commodity need of South Africans, supplying electricity at an affordable rate from life to death. Let's flip the coin and look at the situation. What is the war about? Not about the supply of electricity, because Eskom has handled those crises internally with whatever resources they had, which he explained. It is all about who can get the biggest chunk of Eskom monies and the resources. The issue of denying the country or trying to block the president and the parliamentary processes to go and put up nuclear is to continue to milk Eskom, because that is a milking cow that these old companies that are having contracts running up to 2035 can continue doing that. And they've come with strategies. It's a white capital market strategy. Kill this other company that has taken a chunk of business from us. Talk to other companies like Barlow World to stop aiding them to producing coal to supply Eskom with affordable coal so that Eskom can survive and make profit and supply electricity. You will disrupt that whole process. You disrupt it economically. You disrupt it in the business sector. You discredit. It is normal in the economic business to discredit your rivals. But also what they have done now is because they think this whole process of Tegeta and Eskom is protected by the head of state, they will use that as also an option to go for the head of state to create this big cloud. I wonder what will be the next accusation to President Jacob Zuma. But it looks like everything that happens in the country, I'm surprised that he has not been mentioned in the Esidimeni saga, but it looks like everybody who's associated with him or is purported to be associated with him is deemed to be corrupt in the country. And like Sepe said, I'm very proud and impressed with the way Matshela Koko has so far responded articulately and with records at hand to the question that has been presented in front of him.
And I mean, there is the matter also being in court with Matshela Koko saying that it wouldn't hold water. There was a demeanor about him, as you were saying, very self-assured. He knows what he's talking about. He's gone through the run-of-the-mill with the necessary details of this particular transaction and, saying that it wouldn't hold water in court. Do you think we might find that anticlimax or disappointment for some, that indeed there's no wrongdoing, it's above board, it's transactions that had been done previously, it's just that it's been portrayed in a particular manner to suit a particular outcome?
Yeah, let's look at the so-called the bone of contention, which is the prepayment to Tegeta. It is a matter of it's common cause that the 586 million rand or so that Eskom prepaid Tegeta for the supply of coal, that was in May 2016, I think, from the records we understand, and all of that coal was delivered to Eskom in 2016. So the question I'm sitting here now, really battling, and these members of parliament are making this process even more worse. They have never once asked, well, if the last tonnage of the 586 million rand prepayment has since been delivered, why exactly are we now taking all of these hours and going to this great deal of expense to ask a question about what has been delivered and failing? In another case, they received testimony that another company, which is Exaro, in the same period that Tegeta was given a prepayment, that company got 1.8 billion rand for a power station for the mine near Matla power station here in Vereeniging. They got 1.8 billion rand in terms, because it's a cost plus mine. So again, Eskom had to pay them. No question is asked whatsoever. And at the same period, they've been having this take or pay agreement for Lepalale, for Medupi Power Station. Now, as early as 2013, by the way, I warned whoever that had to be warned at Eskom at the time that that contract could not stand, it was unlawful, and they needed to have done something to have it cancelled. They haven't. The long story short is that yesterday, to our horror, we hear that 11.4 billion rand to date has been paid and not even one wheelbarrow of coal has been delivered. Now, this inquiry if they were going to be looking at that and say, but hold on a second, if 586 million rand is paid and all the coal has been delivered, the circumstances we can look at, but that is not something that can take you months. It's something that in a day you could determine whether or not there was malfeasance, whether there was corruption or anything else. But this other issue of this contract, why did they not serve to reverse it? On the other hand, let's not forget, by the way, that South 32, which used to operate under the name BHP Billiton before the restructuring of the company and the breakup into South 32. South 32 to this day still pays the lowest price of electricity. In fact, it pays less than the cost of generation by Eskom for its smelter. And that contract, again, it needed to have been investigated because it would appear that the circumstances under which it was reached are corrupt. That contract, nobody has ever mentioned anything about it. In fact, some years ago, the man who then was the energy regulator at the time, Dr. Xolani, I forget his surname, he then, of course, went over to BHP Billiton and became the chairman of BHP Billiton South Africa. And that allegation is supposedly it was supposed to have been asked or addressed in these proceedings. It is not. So when we look at the number of companies that whereby they have got this long-term contracts, one of them, the boiler maintenance, for example, there is another company, a German company, that is servicing the boilers of Eskom. And it is in their interest that those boilers should be breaking down as they are because they are not doing enough work. The question becomes, well, what is that going to lead to? On the issue of nuclear, one minister, and I will not say who, that minister reached an agreement with an American nuclear company. And when that was the case, and they were peddling that to South Africa, there was no problem whatsoever with nuclear energy. The problem came that when that particular minister could not deliver the promise to those particular, that company, which is now, by the way, is itself in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, the American nuclear company, and when they could not deliver that contract, all of a sudden now they invested so much in public relations and in mainstream media advertisements to say that the demon is the Russians coming with their nuclear power. Yet all these years, the energy security master plan of this country has provided for nuclear energy. So we have to read everything else. We need to go a lot more broader and read things in context and actually read the story behind the story. Yes,
but the instability in terms of leadership right now, I mean, we're made to believe that there is this operation sweep up or clean up. We're seeing executives resigning. We have Anoj Singh, Prish Govender, back-to-back resigning. That doesn't help in instilling confidence in that there is no wrongdoing at Eskom.
It wouldn't help in any organization whereby you've got leadership, exiting the way it has been happening. It wouldn't help. But this is a structured thing. It is well planned to say, let us frustrate those executives who are there and who have been there for a long time in order for Eskom to be destabilized. And it will have we'll wake up one day, we'll find Eskom with a whole new board and a whole new executives. The whole management, which is operational. And this is what the white capital companies are aiming at, you understand, to get new people who will not question. Separately to the fact that Matshela Koko himself, under or during the time of Brian Miller, they questioned some of the things which were happening and they refused to be drawn into that. And what did they have to do? They had to go for them in their private capacity. We know when this whole saga started, Matshela Koko was being mentioned that her daughter has received their contract without people making investigations and looking at the facts, as if our children cannot make business with the government when everybody else, from the president to Minister Pravin and everybody else in government, kids have made business with government. We did not focus on him doing his job at Eskom. We focused on his stepdaughter has received a contract without even making sure that was it illegal, was unprocedural, or so ever. But the exodus of experienced executives in state-owned enterprises, and I want to say this, it is a well-placed strategy to can actually make these entities dysfunctional, to can make them collapse so that white capital or private sector can come in and say, government cannot handle these entities. Can they be privatized so that they can buy them out since they've got the money and then run with them in order to milk them more? But that's exactly the problem. Once Eskom becomes privatized, like SAA and whoever, the cost of electricity in the country will become more expensive.
Disaster.
It will become disastrous. So Eskom, SABC, SAA, that are supposed to be running a service to the country, they will be seen as profit-making processes. And what could we do as a country when we decided to privatize it
but
at this stage?
Why should Matshela Koko be believed in that he is the protector of Eskom? He says that he's patriotic, his blood is blue, he's been, enjoyed an illustrious career at Eskom, upholding its processes and governance issues as well. Why should he be believed?
Well, I mean, there hasn't been any wrongdoing, and I think now, with the best attempt to try and cross-examine and question him, there hasn't been anything that actually leads to that. We need to disbelieve him. If anything, has been impressive. But I think going forward in terms of Eskom, what needs to happen now? One of the things that I believe should happen is that Mr. Jabu Mabuza, the newly appointed chairman of Eskom, needs to resign his roles at Business Unity South Africa as well as Business Leadership South Africa. He needs to dissociate with those because the conflict of interest is that inherent. We need to bear in mind that the banks that have held a gun, a proverbial gun, to the head of Eskom, they are members of those organizations. The companies, the mining companies, through the Chamber of Mines, that are sitting beneficiaries of these long-term contracts that have never been questioned, they too are within those associations. So therefore there is conflict of interest because now Mr. Jabu Mabuza needs to lead a board that must take the hard decisions to correct the maladies of over centuries that have been happening. Therefore, that is what we need to do. And secondly, the Deputy President of the Republic and of the ANC president himself, he needs to tread with caution because he, again, that conflict cannot be removed because the company that he sold to Pembani, and Pembani still continue to do business with Glencore, who is doing business with, questions, unfortunately, will linger on. And the more he gets involved, more taking into account that one of the companies that he was involved in Mozambique, is supplying power to South Africa at an even 4 times the price per kilowatt hour than what it is costing here locally. So those are the questions, and I'm saying he needs to be at arm's length. But at the moment, he's enthusiastic to want to get involved and unfortunately raising more questions, and it cannot be good for his integrity and for his credibility.
It was also brought in a parliamentary hearing that there is already undue influence, with Mr. Koko saying he offers to negotiate and sit with funders who are withholding money from assisting Eskom because the precondition is that he has to leave first. And he says he's not going to resign, he's going to be steadfast and continue on the work that he's doing. Is there that influence, that they essentially are now calling the shots?
That's blackmailing, actually. They are actually chaining his hands for him not to perform his duties. And as I've mentioned earlier on, this exodus is trying to push these executives out so that they can put people that I will call their own puppets, that they will control and be able to just sign, on a dotted line without engaging and protecting the interest of the country and the organization. I mean, imagine getting into a negotiation and saying to an executive of Eskom, resign yourself from this position, then you can come to us as prospective funders. This is what they've been doing. That's why you see most of the people who leave state entities and departments on pivotal and critical positions, they tend to go and work for these companies as soon as they leave. Tsepo has just mentioned somebody who left the national, energy regulator, and go and join the same company that has, questionable contracts like BHP Bulletin with Eskom. That's what they do. Once he concedes to their proposal, the next thing he'll be sitting on a board of one of these companies, and that's how the white capital has been operating for a number of years, and to destabilize government and to weaken state entities.
All right,
Dr. Kolanim Kwanas is his name, by the way.
We used to call him Dr. X. I didn't want to go there.
Yes.
So thanks so much, gentlemen. That's Tsepo Khadima and Botsang Moilwa, political analyst and economic analyst, joining us, looking at the proceedings in Parliament earlier with regards to the state of capture in Eskom. For now, though, we take a quick break. We'll see you shortly.